In this section of the course, we are going to be building out a consensus algorithm for our blockchain network. So what a consensus algorithm is it is a way for all of the nodes inside of our network to agree upon what the correct data inside of the blockchain is. So for example, in the real world, when a blockchain is totally built out, it is running across hundreds or thousands of nodes, and every transaction and every block that's being created, it's all broadcast to the entire blockchain network. And there's a possibility that during these broadcasts, a hiccup could occur, and maybe a certain node doesn't receive a piece of information or a transaction that took place, or even maybe there is a bad actor inside of the blockchain network who is sending out false information or creating fraudulent transactions on their copy of the blockchain and trying to broadcast them to the whole network and convince everybody that they are legitimate transactions. So how do we solve for this problem? Well, that's exactly what our consensus algorithm is going to do. Our consensus algorithm will provide us with a way to compare one node to all the other nodes inside of the network to confirm that we have the correct data on the specific node. There are currently many different consensus algorithms out there being used for different blockchain networks. For our blockchain network, we are going to create a consensus algorithm that implements the longest chain rule. So what is this longest chain rule? Well, basically, it's very straightforward. What the longest chain rule does is it takes a look at a single node, and it looks at the copy of the blockchain on that node. It then compares the length of our chain on this node with the length of the chains on all the other nodes. During this comparison, if there's a chain found that has a longer length than the chain that's present on this node, we are going to replace the chain that's on this node with the longest chain in the network. And that's it. That's how our consensus algorithm will work. It will simply compare the chain on the chosen node with all the other chains inside of our network. And if one of the other chains has a longer length than the current node that we're on, then we are simply going to replace the chain of the node we are on with the longest chain in the network. The theory behind using this longest chain rule is that we should be able to trust the longest chain to have the correct data because the most work was put into creating that chain. The longest chain has the most blocks in it, and each of those blocks was mined by using a proof of work. Therefore, we can assume that the whole network contributed to the longest chain because of how much work went into that chain. So that's why we're going to use a consensus algorithm that implements the longest chain rule. The Bitcoin blockchain network itself actually implements this longest chain rule in real life. So we're going to mimic that. In order to build out our consensus algorithm, we are first going to need to build out a new method that we will call chainIsValid. This method will simply validate a blockchain by comparing all of the hashes of all of the blocks inside of the chain. After that, we are going to build a consensus endpoint that we will hit whenever we want to use our consensus algorithm. Cool. And that's it. That's all we're going to have to do in this section to build out our consensus algorithm. Let's start building out our chainIsValid method in the next video. I'll see you there.